You cannot control the world. You can control your response to it. That distinction is the beginning of discipline. This is Umbral Audio. Meditations. Marcus Aurelius. Book 1. A record of gratitude. Listen slowly and let the mind settle. From my grandfather, Varus, I learned good morals and the government of my temper. From the reputation and remembrance of my father, modesty and a manly character. From my mother, piety and beneficence and abstinence, not only from evil deeds, but even from evil thoughts. And further, simplicity in my way of living, far removed from the habits of the rich. From my great-grandfather, not to have frequented public schools, and to have had good teachers at home, and to know that on such things a man should spend liberally. From my tutor, not to side with the green or the blue faction at the games in the circus, nor with the light or heavy-armed gladiators, and to endure labor, and to want little, and to work with my own hands, and not to meddle with other people's affairs, and not to be ready to listen to slander. From Dionysus, not to busy myself about trifling things, and not to give credit to what was said by miracle workers and jugglers about incantations and the driving away of demons and such things, and not to breed quails for fighting, nor to give myself up passionately to such things, and to endure freedom of speech, and to have become intimate with philosophy, and to have been a hearer first of Bacchius, then of Tandisus and Marcianus, and to have written dialogues in my youth, and to have desired a plank bed and skin, and whatever else of the kind belongs to the Grecian discipline. From Rusticus, I received the impression that my character required improvement and discipline, and from him I learned not to be led astray to sophistic emulation, nor to writing on speculative matters, nor to delivering little oratory speeches, nor to showing myself off as a man who practices much discipline, or does benevolent acts in order to make a display, and to abstain from rhetoric and poetry and fine writing, and not to walk about in the house in my outdoor dress, nor to do other things of the kind, and to write my letters with simplicity, like the letter that Rusticus wrote from Sinussa to my mother. And with respect to those who have offended me by words or done me wrong, to be easily disposed, to be pacified and reconciled as soon as they have shown a readiness to be reconciled, and to read carefully, and not to be satisfied with superficial understanding of a book, nor hastily to give my assent to those who talk overmuch. And I am indebted to him for being acquainted with the discourses of Epictetus, which he communicated to me out of his own collection. From Apollonius, I learned freedom of will and an undeviating steadiness of purpose, and to look to nothing else, not even for a moment, except to reason, and to be always the same. In sharp pains, on the occasion of the loss of a child, and in long illness, and to see clearly in a living example that the same man can be both most resolute and yielding, and not peevish in giving his instruction. And to have had before my eyes a man who clearly considered his experience and his skill in expounding philosophical principles as the smallest of his merits. And from him I learned how to receive from friends what are esteemed favors, without being either humbled by them or letting them pass unnoticed. From Sextus, a benevolent disposition, and the example of a family governed in a fatherly manner, and the idea of living comfortably to nature, and gravity without affection, and to look carefully after the interest of friends, and to tolerate ignorant persons, and those who form opinions without consideration, and to be ready to yield in matters where others have strong opinions, and to give way without envy. And from him I learned to be mild and conciliatory in the expression of opinions, and not to be dogmatic, and to abstain from fault-finding, and to show no sign of anger or other passion, but to be free from passion, yet full of affection, and to praise without noise, and to possess much knowledge without ostentation. From Alexander the grammarian, to refrain from fault-finding, and not in a reproachful way, to chide those who have uttered any barbarous or solecistic or strange-sounding expression, but dexterously to introduce the very expression which ought to have been used, by some other fit suggestion. From Fronto, I learned to observe what envy and duplicity and hypocrisy are in a tyrant, and that generally those among us who are called patricians are rather deficient in paternal affection. From Alexander the Platonic, not frequently nor without necessity to say to anyone, or to write in a letter, that I have no leisure, nor continually to excuse the neglect of duties required by our relation to those with whom we live, by alleging urgent occupations. From Catullus, not to be indifferent when a friend finds fault, even if he should find fault without reason, but to try to restore him to his usual disposition, and to be ready to speak well of teachers, as it is reported of Domitus and Athenodotus, and to love my children truly. From my brother Severus, to love my kin, and to love truth, and to love justice. And through him I learned to know Thrasea, Helvidius, Cato, Dion, and Brutus. And from him I received the idea of a polity, in which there is the same law for all, a polity administered with regard to equal rights and equal freedoms of speech, and the idea of a kingly government, which respects most of all the freedom of the governed. From Maximus I learned self-government, and not to be led aside by anything, and cheerfulness in all circumstances, as well as in illness, and a just admixture in the moral character of sweetness and dignity, and to do what was set before me without complaining, and to have no man think that he had heard or saw anything when I was not present, and not to be in a hurry, and to listen patiently, and to be firm and not unstable, and to show no anger, and to be free from deceit, and to have a good disposition, and to be kind, and to avoid all falsehood, and to appear like a man who could not be angered, but could be persuaded. From my father, I observed mildness of temper, an unchanged resolution in the things which he had determined after due deliberation, and no vainglory in those things which men call honors, and a love of labor and perseverance, and a readiness to listen to those who had anything to propose for the common good, an undeviating firmness in giving to every man according to his deserts, and a knowledge derived from experience of the occasions for vigorous action and for remission. From the gods, I learned that I had good grandfathers, good parents, a good sister, good teachers, good associates, good kinsmen and friends, nearly everything good, and that I never touched any of them with any offense, though I had it in my power to do so, and that I was never brought into such circumstances as to do anything disgraceful, and that I was not longer brought up with my grandfather's concubine, and that I persevered the flower of my youth, and that I did not make proof of my manhood before the proper season, and that I was subjected to a ruler and a father who was able to take away from me all pride, and to persuade me that it was possible for a man to live in a palace without wanting either guards, or embroidered dresses, or torches, or statues, and such things, but that it is in such a man's power to bring himself very near to the fashion of a private person, without being for this reason either meaner in thought, or more remiss in action, with respect to the things which must be done for the public interest, in a manner that befits a ruler, and that I had good teachers, who showed me by their example that a man ought to take care of his character, and that I had no desire for boys or women, and that I was not led astray by idle curiosity, and that I was not addicted to reading many books, and that I was not curious about trifling things, and that I was content with little, and that I bore illness patiently, and that I had a body capable of enduring much labor, and that I was not given to anger, and that I was not fond of listening to slander, and that I was not superstitious, and that I did not practice astrology, and that I was not easily deceived by appearances, and that I had a good disposition, and that I loved truth, and that I was not proud, and that I was not suspicious, and that I was not given to ostentation, and that I was not vain, and that I was not disposed to quarrel, and that I was not eager for novelty, and that I was not disposed to be angry, and that I was not avaricious, and that I did not seek pleasure as an end, and that I was not fond of bodily indulgence, and that I was not given to excess, and that I was not idle, and that I was not negligent of duty, and that I was not unwilling to listen to advice, and that I did not think much of myself, and that I did not despise others, and that I was not malicious, and that I was not hypocritical, and that I was not given to idle talk, and that I did not waste time in trifles, and that I was not inattentive to my own faults, and that I did not neglect the common good. Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 2. Meditations by Marcus Aurelius. Book 2. A Reminder to the Self. Listen slowly and let the mind settle. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. I can neither be harmed by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly. Nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him, for we are made for cooperation. What is divine is full of providence. Every chance is not divorced from nature, from the weaving together and the unfolding of the things which are ordered by providence. From thence all things flow, and there is, besides necessity, in that which is for the advantage of the whole universe, of which thou art a part. Every nature is contented with itself when it goes on its way well. And a rational nature goes on its way well when in its thoughts it assents to nothing false or uncertain, and when it directs its movements to social acts only, and when it confines its desires and aversions to the things which are in its power, and when it is satisfied with everything that happens, since it happens as the distribution of the whole. I am composed of the formal and the material, and neither of them will perish into non-existence, as neither of them came into existence out of non-existence. Every part of me then will be reduced by change into some part of the universe, and that again will change into another part of the universe, and so on forever. Let thy every deed be done as though it were thy last. Free thyself from distraction, from purposeless movements, from complaining, from pretended injury. How little trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only to what he does himself, that it may be just and pure. Do not waste the remainder of thy life in thoughts about others, when thou dost not refer thy thoughts to some object of common utility. The soul of man does violence to itself, first of all when it becomes an abscess and, as it were, a tumor on the universe, so far as it can. For to be vexed at anything which happens is the separation of ourselves from nature, in some part of which the natures of all other things are contained. He who does wrong to himself. He who acts unjustly to himself, because he makes himself bad. Often injustice lies in what thou dost not do, and not only in what thou doest. Be indifferent to what makes no difference. The time of human life is a point. The substance is in a flux. The perception is dull. The composition of the whole body subject to putrefaction. The soul a whirl, fortune hard to divine, and fame a thing devoid of judgment. Briefly, all that is of the body is a stream, and all that is of the soul is a dream and vapor. Life is a warfare and a stranger's sojourn, and after fame is oblivion. What then is that which is able to conduct a man? One thing and only one: philosophy. Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 3. Book 3. On the governance of the self. Listen slowly and let the mind settle. We ought to consider not only that our life is daily wasting away and that a smaller part of it remains, but another thing also must be taken into account: that if a man should live longer, it is quite uncertain whether the understanding will still continue sufficient for the comprehension of things, and retain the power of contemplation which strives to acquire the knowledge of the divine and the human. For if he shall begin to fall into dotage, perspiration and nutrition, and imagination and appetite, and whatever else there is of the kind will not fail. But the power of making use of ourselves, and filling up the measure of our duty, and clearly separating all appearances, and considering whether a man should now depart from life, and whatever else of the kind absolutely requires a disciplined reason, all this is already extinguished. We must make haste then, not only because we are daily nearer to death, but also because the conception of things and the understanding of them cease first. We ought to observe also that even the things which follow after the things which are produced according to nature contain something pleasing and attractive. For instance, when bread is baked, some parts of it crack, and these parts which thus open, and have a certain fashion contrary to the purpose of the baker's art, are beautiful in a manner, and in a peculiar way excite a desire for eating. And again figs, when they are quite ripe open, and in the ripe olives, the very circumstance of their being near to rottenness adds a peculiar beauty to the fruit. And the ears of corn bending down, and the lion's eyebrows, and the foam which flows from the mouth of wild boars, and many other things, though they are far from being beautiful if a man should examine them severally, still, because they are consequent upon the things which are formed by nature, help to adorn them, and they please the mind. So that if a man should have a feeling and deeper insight with respect to the things which are produced in the universe, there is hardly anything which comes into existence which he will not contemplate with pleasure. And so he will see even the real gaping jaws of wild beasts with no less pleasure than those which painters and sculptors show by imitation. And in an old woman or an old man, he will be able to see a certain maturity and comeliness. And the attractive loveliness of young persons he will be able to look on with chaste eyes. And many such things will present themselves, not pleasing to every man, but to him only who has become truly familiar with nature and her works. Hippocrates, after curing many diseases, himself fell sick and died. The Chaldee foretold the deaths of many, and then fate caught them too. Alexander and Pompeius and Julius Caesar, and so often completely destroying whole cities, and in battle cutting to pieces many 10,000s of cavalry and infantry, themselves too at last departed from life. Heraclitus, after so many speculations on the conflagration of the universe, was filled with water internally and died smeared all over with mud. Democritus was consumed by lice, and other lice killed Socrates. What means all this? Thou hast embarked, thou hast made the voyage, thou art come to shore. Get out. If indeed to another life, there is no want of gods, not even there. But if to a state without sensation, thou wilt cease to be held by pains and pleasures, and to be a slave to the vessel, which is as much inferior as that which serves it as superior. One thing here is worth a great deal: to pass thy life in truth and justice, with a benevolent disposition even to liars and unjust men. Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 4. Book 4. On Steadiness and the Inner Citadel. That which rules within, when it is according to nature, is so affected with respect to the events which happen, that it always easily adapts itself to that which is and to that which happens, as the circumstances may require. For it requires no definite material, but moves towards its purpose, under certain conditions, however, and it makes a material for itself out of that which opposes it, as fire lays hold of what falls into it, by which a light fire would have been extinguished. But when the fire is strong, it soon appropriates to itself the matter which is heaped on it, and consumes it, and rises higher by means of this very material. Let no act be done without a purpose, nor otherwise than according to the perfect principles of art. Men seek retreats for themselves, houses in the country, seashores, and mountains, and thou too art wont to desire such things very much. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men. For it is in thy power whenever thou shalt choose to retire into thyself. For nowhere, either with more quiet or more freedom from troubles, does a man retire than into his own soul, particularly when he has within him such thoughts, that by looking into them he is immediately in perfect tranquillity. And I affirm that tranquillity is nothing else than the good ordering of the mind. Constantly, then, give to thyself this retreat, and renew thyself, and let thy principles be brief and fundamental, which, as soon as thou shalt recur to them, will be sufficient to cleanse the soul completely, and to send thee back free from all discontent with the things to which thou returnest. Do not waste the remainder of thy life in thoughts about others, when thou dost not refer thy thoughts to some object of common utility. He who has a vehement desire for posthumous fame does not consider that every one of those who remember him will himself also die very soon. Then again also they who have succeeded them, until the whole remembrance shall have been extinguished, as it is transmitted through men who foolishly admire and perish. Suppose that those who remember are even immortal, and that the remembrance will be immortal. What then is this to thee? And I say not, what is it to the dead, but what is it to the living? What is praise? Except indeed so far as it has a certain utility. Take away thy opinion, and then there is taken away the complaint. I have been harmed. Take away the complaint. I have been harmed. And the harm is taken away. Whatever happens to thee has been prepared for thee from all eternity. And the implication of causes was from eternity spinning the thread of thy being, and of that which is incident to it. Whether the universe is a concourse of atoms, or nature is a system, let this first be established, that I am a part of the whole which is governed by nature. Next, I am in a manner intimately related to the parts which are of the same kind with myself. Frequently consider the connection of all things in the universe, and their relation to one another. For in a manner all things are implicated with one another, and all in this way are friendly to one another. For one thing comes in order after another, and this is by virtue of the active moment and mutual conspiration and the unity of the substance. Adapt thyself to the things with which thy lot has been cast, and love the men among whom thy lot has fallen, but do so truly and sincerely. Everything harmonizes with me, which is harmonious to thee, O universe. Nothing for me is too early nor too late, which is in due time for thee. Everything is fruit to me, which thy seasons bring, O nature. All things are from thee, all things are in thee, all things tend to thee. Either the world is a well-arranged whole, or a chaos huddled together, but still a universe. But can a certain order subsist in thee, and disorder in me? Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 5. Book 5. On Action, Duty, and Acceptance. Listen slowly. Let the mind settle. In the morning, when thou risest unwillingly, let this thought be present. I am rising to the work of a human being. Why then am I dissatisfied, if I am going to do the things for which I exist, and for which I was brought into the world? Or have I been made for this, to lie in the bedclothes and keep myself warm? But this is more pleasant. Dost thou exist then to take thy pleasure, and not at all for action or exertion? Dost thou not see the little plants, the little birds, the ants, the spiders, the bees, working together to put in order their several parts of the universe? And art thou unwilling to do the work of a human being? And dost thou not make haste to do that which is according to thy nature? But it is necessary to take rest also. It is necessary. However, nature has fixed bounds to this too. She has fixed bounds both to eating and drinking. And yet thou goest beyond these bounds, beyond what is sufficient. Yet in thy acts it is not so. Thou stoppest short of what thou canst do. Thou lovest not thyself. For if thou didst, thou wouldst love thy nature and her will. Do the things external which fall upon thee distract thee? Give thyself time to learn something new and good, and cease to be whirled around. But then, thou must also avoid being carried about the other way. For those too are triflers, who have wearied themselves in life by their activity, and yet have no object to which to direct every movement, and in a word, all their thoughts. Be not careless in deeds, nor confused in words, nor rambling in thought, nor let thy soul be contracted nor expanded. Neither be thou active nor passive beyond measure. Observe, the man who loves glory thinks that his own good is what another man says or thinks of him. The man who loves pleasure thinks that his own good is what he feels. But the man who has understanding thinks that his own good is what he does. It is in thy power, whenever thou shalt choose to retire into thyself. For nowhere either with more quiet or more freedom from troubles does a man retire than into his own soul. Constantly give to thyself this retreat, and renew thyself. Let thy principles be brief and fundamental, which, as soon as thou shalt recur to them, will be sufficient to cleanse the soul completely, and to send thee back free from all discontent with the things to which thou returnest. Do not act as if thou wert going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over thee. While thou livest, while it is in thy power, be good. Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 6. Book 6. On reason, order, and the nature of things. Listen slowly. Let the mind settle. The substance of the universe is obedient and compliant, and the reason which governs it has in itself no cause for doing evil. For it has no malice, nor does it do evil to anything, nor is anything harmed by it, but all things are made and perfected according to this reason. Let it make no difference to thee whether thou art cold or warm, if thou art doing thy duty, and whether thou art drowsy or satisfied with sleep, and whether ill spoken of or praised, and whether dying or doing something else. For it is one of the acts of life, this act by which we die. It is sufficient then, in this act, also to do well what we have in hand. Look within. Let neither the peculiar quality of anything nor its value escape thee. All existing things soon change, and they will either be reduced to vapor, if indeed all substance is one, or they will be dispersed. The ruling faculty is master of itself, and it makes everything comfortable to itself. Everything is accomplished in due time and by necessity. Frequently consider the connection of all things in the universe, and their relation to one another. All things are implicated with one another, and in this way are friendly to one another. For one thing comes in order after another, and this is by virtue of the active movement and mutual conspiration and the unity of the substance. Adapt thyself to the things with which thy lot has been cast, and love the men among whom thy lot has fallen, and do so truly and sincerely. Every instrument, tool, vessel if it does that for which it has been made as well, and yet he who made it is not present. But in the things which are held together by nature, the power which made them is present and remains in them. Wherefore thou must the more reverently think of this power, and believe that, if thou dost live and act according to its will, everything in thee is in conformity to intelligence. And thus also in the universe, the whole is in conformity to itself. If thou workest at that which is before thee, following right reason seriously, vigorously, calmly, without allowing anything else to distract thee, but keeping thy divine part pure, as if thou shouldest be bound to give it back immediately. If thou holdest to this, expecting nothing, fearing nothing, but satisfied with thy present activity according to nature, and with heroic truth in every word and sound which thou utterest, thou wilt be happy. And there is no man who was able to prevent this. Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 7. Book 7, on character, endurance, and clarity of judgment. Listen slowly. Let the mind settle. What is badness? It is that which thou hast often seen. And on the occasion of everything which happens, keep this in mind, that it is that which thou hast often seen. Everywhere up and down thou wilt find the same things, with which the old histories are filled, those of the Middle Ages and those of our own day, with which cities and houses are filled now. There is nothing new. All things are both familiar and short-lived. How can our principles become dead unless the impressions which correspond to them are extinguished? But it is in thy power continuously to fan them into flame. I can have that opinion about anything which I ought to have. If I can, why am I disturbed? The things which are external to my mind have no relation to it at all. Let this be the state of thy effects, and thou standest erect. Nothing happens to any man which he is not formed by nature to bear. Men do not disturb thee, but thy judgments about them disturb thee. Take away thy judgment, and thou hast taken away the thought, I am hurt. Take away the thought, I am hurt, and the hurt itself is taken away. If a thing is difficult to be accomplished by thyself, do not think that it is impossible for man. But if anything is possible for man, and conformable to his nature, think that this can be obtained by thyself too. In the gymnastic exercises, suppose that a man has torn thee with his nails, and by dashing against thy head has inflicted a wound. Well, we neither show anger nor suspicion nor hatred against him, nor do we stand aloof from him, but we are on our guard against him for the future, yet without suspicion or hatred. just in the same way we should act towards those who have offended us in other matters. The best way of avenging thyself is not to become like the wrongdoer. Consider what kind of men they are whose approbation thou wishest to gain. What are their minds, and what things they pursue and avoid? Do not waste the remainder of thy life in thoughts about others, when thou dost not refer thy thoughts to some object of common utility. He who fears death either fears the loss of sensation or a different kind of sensation. But if thou shalt have no sensation, neither wilt thou feel any harm. And if thou shalt acquire another kind of sensation, thou wilt be a different kind of living being, and thou wilt not cease to live. Wherefore, do not disturb thyself. Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 8. Book 8 on self-command, perspective, and inner harmony. Listen slowly. Let the mind settle. This reflection also tends to the removal of the desire of empty fame, that thou art not dissatisfied with thy life, and with the time which thou spendest in it. Thou hast not leisure or ability to read, but thou hast leisure or ability to check arrogance. Thou hast leisure or ability to be superior to pleasure and pain. Thou hast leisure or ability to be superior to love of fame. Thou hast leisure or ability not to be vexed at stupid and ungrateful people, nay, even to care for them. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with busybody, ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. I can neither be harmed by any of them, for no man will involve me in wrong, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him, for we were made for cooperation. If thou workest at that which is before thee, following right reason seriously, vigorously, calmly, without allowing anything else to distract thee, but keeping thy divine part pure, as if thou shouldest be bound to give it back immediately. If thou holdest to this, expecting nothing, fearing nothing, but satisfied with thy present activity according to nature, thou wilt live happy. Do not then seek to have events happen as thou wishest, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and thy life will go well. Remember that man lives only in the present. In this fleeting instant, all the rest of his life is either past or uncertain. Do not trouble thyself by picturing to thyself the whole of thy life. Do not let thy thoughts at once embrace all the various troubles which thou mayest expect to befall thee, but on every occasion ask thyself, what is there in this which is intolerable and past bearing? For thou wilt be ashamed to confess. Then remind thyself that neither the future nor the past pains thee, but only the present. If thou art pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs thee, but thy judgment about it. And it is in thy power to wipe out this judgment now. Everything which happens is either endurable or not. If it is endurable, then endure it and cease to complain. If it is not endurable, then cease to complain, for it will soon cease. Remember also that every pain is an option. Consider that before long, thou wilt be nobody and nowhere, nor will anything exist of the things which thou now seest, nor any of those who are now living. All things are changing. Thou thyself art in continuous mutation, and in a manner in continuous destruction, and the whole universe too. Thou must always bear in mind that what happens now has happened from all eternity, and will happen to all eternity. What is thy duty? What the nature of man requires. Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 9. Book 9, on justice, duty, and the common good. Listen slowly. Let the mind settle. He who acts unjustly acts impiously. For since the universal nature has made rational animals for the sake of one another, to help one another according to their deserts, but in no way to injure one another, he who transgresses her will is clearly guilty of impiety toward the highest divinity. He too who lies is guilty of impiety toward the same divinity. For the universal nature is the nature of things that are, and things that are have a relation to all things that have come into existence. He who pursues pleasure as good and avoids pain as evil is guilty of impiety. For such a man must of necessity find fault with the universal nature, alleging that it aligns things unjustly to the good and the bad. Because frequently the bad are in the enjoyment of pleasure, and possess the things which pleasure is produced, and the good have pain for their share, and the things which cause pain. He who is afraid of pain will sometimes also be afraid of something, which will happen in the world, and even this is impiety. But he who pursues pleasure will not abstain from injustice, and this is plainly impiety. If thou workest at that which is before thee, following right reason seriously, vigorously, calmly, without allowing anything else to distract thee, but keeping thy divine part pure, as if thou shouldest be bound to give it back immediately, if thou holdest to this, expecting nothing, fearing nothing, but satisfied with thy present activity according to nature, thou wilt be happy. Nothing is more wretched than a man who traverses everything in around and pries into the things beneath the earth, as the poet says, and seeks by conjecture what is in the minds of his neighbors, without perceiving that it is sufficient to attend to the divinity within him and to serve it sincerely. And this consists in keeping it pure from passion and thoughtlessness, and a satisfaction with what comes from gods and men. He who does wrong to himself. He who acts unjustly to himself, because he makes himself bad. Often injustice lies in what thou dost not do, not only in what thou doest. Do not be satisfied with the superficial view of things. Do not act as if thou wert going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over thee. While thou livest, while it is in thy power, be good. The best way of avenging thyself is not to become like the wrongdoer. What more dost thou want when thou hast once made thyself a man of good will and justice? Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 10. Book 10. On self-examination, humility, and readiness. Listen slowly and let the mind settle. Wilt thou then, my soul, never be good and simple and one and naked, more manifest than the body which surrounds thee? Wilt thou never enjoy an affectionate and contented disposition? Wilt thou never be full and without a want of any kind, longing for more, nor desiring anything, either animate or inanimate, for the enjoyment of pleasure? Wilt thou never be able to live contentedly by thyself, without craving for company, nor needing solitude as a remedy? Hast thou not yet perceived that the ruling faculty must be superior to all external things? Receive wealth or prosperity without arrogance. Be ready also to part with it. If thou hast ever seen a hand cut off, or a foot, or a head, lying anywhere separated from the rest of the body, such does a man make himself, as far as he can, who is not content with what happens, and separates himself from others, or does anything unsocial. Suppose that thou hast detached thyself from the natural unity, for thou wast made by nature apart, but now thou hast cut thyself off. Yet here there is this beautiful provision, that is in thy power again to unite thyself. God has allowed this to no other part, after it has been separated and cut asunder, to come together again. But consider the kindness by which he has distinguished man, since he has put it in his power not to be separated at all, and if he has been separated, to return and be united and resume his place as a part. As a part of the universe, do thy work, and do it without complaining. If thou art pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs thee, but thy judgment about it. And it is in thy power to wipe out this judgment now. Everything which happens, happens justly. Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up, if thou wilt ever dig. Discipline begins with memory. Continue with Book 11. Book 11, on character, restraint, and the discipline of thought. Listen slowly. Let the mind settle. These are the things in which thou must instruct thyself, and habituate thyself to think. First, what is my relation to men, and that we are made for one another? Second, what is my relation to the gods, and that all things are the work of providence? Third, what am I? And of what kind is that part of me which is called the ruling faculty? Thou must often reflect what kind of soul thou hast, and whether it is ruled by reason or by passion. Consider how many are the cares and disturbances of those who follow fame, and how free from care is he who lives according to nature. Never value anything as profitable to thyself, which shall compel thee to break thy promise, to lose thy self-respect, to hate any man, to suspect, to curse, to act the hypocrite, or to desire anything that needs walls or curtains. He who is chosen to be governed by reason and to obey the divine law within him is free. The opinion of 10,000 men is of no value if none of them knows anything about the matter. Do not waste what remains of thy life in speculating about others, unless it is for some public good. Be not ashamed to be helped, for it is thy business to do thy duty, like a soldier in the assault of a war. What then if thou art lame, and canst climb the wall by thyself, but with the help of another thou canst do it? Always bear in mind what sort of men they are whose praise thou seekest, and what are their opinions. It is not things themselves that disturb men, but their judgments about things. If thou art pained by an external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs thee, but thy judgment about it. And it is in thy power to wipe out this judgment now. Discipline comes with memory. Continue with Book 12. Book 12. On acceptance and permanence and release. Listen slowly. Let the mind settle. All those things at which thou wishest to arrive by a circuitous road, thou canst have now, if thou dost not refuse them to thyself. Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil. I can neither be harmed by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly. Nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him, for we are made for cooperation. Begin the work of the day, saying to thyself, I shall meet with meddling, ingratitude, arrogance, disloyalty, ill will, and selfishness, all of them due to ignorance of what is good or evil. Yet none of these things can harm me, nor can I become angry with my kinsman, nor hate him, for we are made for cooperation. Look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up, if thou wilt ever dig. Everything harmonizes with me, which is harmonious to thee, O universe. Nothing for me is too early nor too late, which is in due time for thee. All is fruit to me, which thy seasons bring, O nature. From thee are all things, in thee are all things, to thee all things return. Often think of the rapidity with which things pass by and disappear, both the things which are now and the things which are to be. Substance is like a river in a continual flow. The activities of things are in constant change, and the causes work in infinite varieties. Time is like a river made up of the events which happen, and a violent stream, for as soon as a thing has been seen, it is carried away, and another comes in its place, and this will be carried away too. Remember that all is opinion, and opinion rests with thee. Do not act as if thou wert going to live 10,000 years. Death hangs over thee. While thou livest, while it is in thy power, be good. Do not be disturbed. Do not make thyself uneasy. Be simple. Pass through this little space of time, conformably to nature, and end thy journey in contentment, just as an olive falls off when it is ripe, blessing nature who produced it, and thanking the tree on which it grew. You have reached the end of our condensed reading of Meditations, written by Marcus Aurelius, read aloud by me, Umbral Audio. Carry what is useful, release what is not. Farewell.